Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to continue on with this little mini series of beer reviews that I've been doing for you to celebrate the channel's 10th anniversary. Crazy beers for 10 years as I've called it in some of these videos. But for this review we are going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel many times before. These guys are a very, very recognisable Scottish craft beer brand, and the beer itself is a style that I know this brewery can still do pretty damn well. It's from a series of beers that this brewery do that I've actually never covered on the channel before, and I've never tried anything from this particular series actually, but I picked up a few bottles from the series over the years and decided that I wanted to save them for special occasions on the channel. And what better opportunity am I going to have to open one of these than on the channel's 10th anniversary. So that's why we're doing this review now. And this beer is actually a very early member of that particular series of beers too. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head up to a little place called Ellon in Aberdeenshire in the northeast of Scotland, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Brewdog. Now this particular beer is from their Paradox series, which is a series of, you know, quite big, beastly Imperial stouts that are aged in a variety of different Scotch whisky and bourbon barrels and things like this. But this one is the Paradox Isle of Arran, the 15% version. There was a 10% version of this beer once upon a time, but this is potentially the oldest bottle of Brewdog beer that I still have in my possession. There might be one more that could be a little bit older than this. I honestly can't remember, but this was the very first Paradox beer that I bought from these guys. It's one of the very early members of the series as well. I remember that they had Jura and Islay around this time too, but yeah, I just bought this one from the original bar near Marshall College in Aberdeen because it was recommended to me by one of the guys in there. But I know these guys still do some pretty damn good Imperial stouts. I should point out as well that this beer is very slightly out of date. The best before date on the bottle here is the 15th of March 2023, but considering what this beer is, an Arran whisky barrel aged Imperial stout at 15% ABV, to be honest I really don't think it's going to matter all that much, but definitely cool to try one of the old school Brewdog beers for the very first time, and to cover the Paradox series on the channel for the very first time too. So let's crack on with this beer then and see what it's going to have in store for us. Really excited to finally open this bottle. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brewdog before, and we will be adding a few more reviews to that list over the next little while because I do have some really classic Brewdog beers that I want to review for you. I don't tend to cover much of their new stuff because I don't think it's that good anymore, and the company's been kind of mired in controversy and all this, but that's another story. But yeah, we will add a few more to that list over the next week while, like I said. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this beer in the Scottish playlist along with a number of other things, and we will of course be adding to that list over the next little while. And check out the playlist of beers from other countries too. But yeah, let's crack on and have a wee look at this one. The Brewdog Paradox Isle of Arran, a 15% Arran whisky barrel aged Imperial stout. So, on to my brewery notes. Brewdog is the love child of James Watt and Martin Dickey, and the company was founded back in April of 2007 at a small unit in the Keswick Industrial Estate in Fraserburgh in the very northeast of Scotland. But both of these guys studied together at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. James studied law and economics, if I remember correctly, while Martin studied in the brewing and distilling programme. And then after he completed that, he went on to work for Thornbridge Brewery down in England for about 2 years, starting in 2005, before they got together and started their own company. But these guys over the years were known for being very experimental, and for a period of time they were known for their strong beers as well, but they were largely inspired by the American craft brewing renaissance, and they often cite Stone Brewing Company in California as being a particularly strong influence on where they wanted to go with their beers. But more recently in 2012 they moved their main brewing operations to a new and purpose-built facility in Ellon, Aberdeenshire, a bit further to the south of Fraser-Broughton and closer to the city of Aberdeen, where I studied chemistry, and they've continually expanded this facility over the years. These days they've got several bars across the world. They began opening these back in 2010 with the original bar beside Marshall College in Aberdeen, but this kind of franchise that they have these days is well in excess of 120 different bars now, from what I understand. In recent times they've continued to open the new bars. They've expanded their brewing operations as well, and they now have breweries in Columbus in Ohio over in the American Midwest. They took over Stone Brewing's facility in Berlin in Germany, and they have another brewery in Brisbane in Australia too. They're distilling spirits under the name Lone Wolf Distillery, and they've also got their Overworks facility in Ellon, which is producing sour beers, and they started releasing stuff from that in early 2019. But today they're producing in the region of 800,000 hectolitres of beer per year, so that's going to be about 80 million litres. So these guys are potentially one of the biggest by volume craft beer producers in the world, actually, which is kind of impressive when you consider that these guys came from the northeast of Scotland and just went for it from there. But as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 550 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they've done a whole host of different styles over the years. But yeah, my favourites from Brewdog back in the day, it would have been the Hardcore IPA, which was a lovely old school, big bitter and sweet caramelly West Coast IPA. Dogma Scotch Ale was a firm favourite too. Electric India was one that I really liked. So yeah, those are some of my favourite beers. The 5am Radio, the original recipe of that, was also a really interesting one. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Brewdog for the moment. Obviously this company has had a number of controversies and things in recent times regarding the behaviour of James Watt in particular, and a number of their business practices. But yeah, I kind of just want to focus on this beer because this one comes from a time when Brewdog were, pretty respectable. They were a really quite respectable beer brand and things at that time. And I've heard that this series of beers in Paradox is pretty damn good too. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can really tell you about Brewdog for the moment. If you want to learn more, check out the brewery website. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. Just be aware that their social media is kind of quite clickbaity and stuff like this. But yeah, you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done over the years. But let's go on and actually have a little look at this beer itself. So I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. You can see that this has the original Brewdog artwork, so I will be hanging on to this bottle once we're finished with the beer, because I think this is really quite lovely. You'll see the two other Paradox beers that I have, I think it's Compass Box and Heaven Hill, if I'm not mistaken. Both of those have slightly different artwork in comparison to this one. This is the kind of OG deal actually, and we've got the little blurb on the side that Brewdog always used to have, and you can see that we've got one of the original bottle caps on this one too. But like I said to you earlier, this one is a 15% Imperial Stout aged in Isle of Arran whisky barrels. Isle of Arran whisky for me is really interesting. I would say that they are, in my experience of the whiskies, is that they are a very well-rounded distillery. Their whiskies give you a little bit of everything, a little bit of brown sugar, a little bit of the lovely woody character, some nuttiness, a bit of floral note, and also some lovely oily fruits. For me, Arran whisky is a very, very well-rounded one, and I would always recommend that you have a taste of that. There are two distilleries on the island now, but for a long time Isle of Arran Distillery have been the sole distillery on the island. But have a go at some of the Arran whiskies, I'm pretty sure you won't be disappointed with them. But let's have a little look at the blurb on this beer before we actually open this one up. So it says, a rock and roll partnership between Scotland's best new distillery, Distiller of the Year 2007, and Scotland's hardcore new microbrewery, gold medal winner, World Beer Cup 2008. Paradox Isle of Arran edition sees Brewdog's killer Imperial Stout matured in stunning whisky casks from Arran Distillery. The rich vanilla sweetness, hints of cinnamon, balancing aromatic fruit and ginger flavours of the Arran malt are are all completely infused deep into the texture of our smooth, robust Imperial Stout, with profound new depths emerging from each pass and sip to release the true complexity and character and depth of flavours in this beer. Please enjoy it at room temperature unless you live in an igloo. Isle of Arran completely rocks. You should really try it too. So yeah, I agree with that. You should try some Isle of Arran whiskey. But yeah, I think we should get this beer open and see what it's all about. I'm just going to check and see. It doesn't seem that there's too much sedimentation in this one. This beer has basically been kept. I kept this in my garage, actually, my parents' garage. So it has been very slightly chilled for a number of years now. But like I said to you, the date on this one is the 15th of the 3rd, 23, and I'm reviewing this for you at the end of July 23. But it should still be fine, as I say, with this style. You don't really have to care about the. You don't have to care so much about the date. In fact, it should still be pretty damn good. So yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. I'm just going to pour this pretty carefully because I'm not sure how the sediment and things is going to be in it. But yeah, we'll have a little look at that. Yeah, a good little bit of sediment at the bottom of the bottle of this one, but it has kind of if I look at it through if I look at it through just through the light, it's actually not all that much, to be honest with you. So yeah, it should be all right in any case. But yeah, you can see that this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect of any Imperial Stout. It's got that lovely dark kind of ebony rosewood colour. If we shine the light through this one, it looks really, really nice. So remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. When it comes to Imperial Stouts as well, you can also do things like use a double or triple mash, which is quite a common technique. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But of course, barrel aging and any adjuncts you put in can affect the colour of the beer too, although when it comes to black beer styles such as Imperial Stouts and things, it's quite difficult to affect the colour of the beer with barrel aging, just because of the presence of the black malt. But you can see that when we poured this beer, it had very little in the way of head to it. You've just got that little kind of foamy ring around the edge of the glass there, which I would describe as being kind of fawn coloured actually, but you can see it's kind of bumpy bubbles, and there's a wee bit of a kind of foamy island in the middle of the liquid there. But one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones just coming up toward the bottom of the head there. But yeah, not much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. And when you consider that it's a 10% barrel aged, 15%, sorry, 10-year-old barrel aged Imperial Stout, that isn't really surprising, to be honest with you. But in terms of its appearance, there's nothing really very surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is. So yeah, I think we should leave it at that for the appearance, and have a wee look at the aroma of this one and see what it's all about. I'm going to say straight away, this is a really very, very nice smelling beer. Yeah, this gives you everything that you would want from a Scotch whisky barrel aged Imperial Stout. And I've said on the channel many times before that you have to be kind of careful when you use Scotch whisky barrels to barrel age these things, because the barrels can really just dominate the flavour and the aroma of the beer. And yeah, in this case it'd be no exception, to be honest. But you know, the Arran whisky is a very smooth one actually, and you can smell this beer. It does have the old school Russian Imperial Stout behind it, but you have got lovely, you've got the lovely barrel notes just giving you so much complexity in this beer. So yeah, I'll say straight away, this beer gives you everything you would want from an RIS, an old school RIS, but the barrel is giving you just a lovely little bit of depth and complexity to the beer. So let's try and break this beer down then and just describe the aroma as best we can. It's always nice to do this. It's always half the experience when it comes to craft beer, as I've said many a time. But yeah, the backbone of this beer, you have that lovely, slightly drier European oaky quality coming out of this beer. As I've said on the channel many times before, there's a clear difference for me between American oak and European oak. They are different species of tree, but yeah, the American oak is a really nice kind of smooth, a slightly vanilla type woody character, whereas the American oak, the European oak, sorry, is a little bit drier and has a little bit more kind of spicy character to it. In this beer, you can definitely smell that it's drier European oak that's in there. So the backbone of this beer, you have that lovely, smooth, slightly drier European oak in there. There is a little touch of vanilla to it, incidentally, but then you get the nice kind of spirit layer. As I said earlier, for me, Arran whiskies have a really nice all-rounded character to them. So within the spirit layer, you're getting a little bit of an oily brown sugar, you are getting little bits of floral character in there, you're also getting wee bits of kind of nutty note and a kind of nice oily fruity character too. So within the spirit, you're getting a little bit of an oily pear and sultana type quality, a little bit of nuttiness, little bits of kind of vanilla and stuff like that too, and just that little bit of spiciness. So the way that the Arran whiskey barrel comes out in this one is really quite nice. But on top of all of this, you do have the Russian Imperial Stout that's been used in the base of this beer, for the base beer, if we can call it that, and that goes together really quite nicely. Back in the day, one of my favourite stouts from Brewdog was Riptide, which I think was 7.5 or 8%. It was a quite sweet stout, from what I remember. And Brewdog were very good at finding a balance between the kind of roasty bitterness that you'd expect of the Russian Imperial Stout and having the kind of sweeter, more modern American take on things as well. And you can kind of smell that in this beer. This is from an era where Brewdog were really like that. A lot of their beers were quite sweet and bright and oily at this time, and you can really smell that in here. So for me, if we move on to the actual malty side of the beer, leaving behind the barrel and so on, with this beer you do get a little bit of a slightly roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust character coming out of the beer. So yeah, roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust for me. On top of that, you have this, you do have a little bit of an almost rye bready character coming out of this one, but that's quite minimal. I would say that the rest of the malt base in this beer, it's kind of like a mix of like chocolate brownie and chocolate muffin, chocolate sponge cake, something like that. So yeah, you've got the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust in the base, but it's actually very smooth. You've got a kind of rye bready character on top of that, and then you get this kind of chocolate brownie, chocolate muffiny, cakey type layer coming out of the beer. Within that, you do have a little touch of nuttiness to it, but again, I wouldn't say that is overly prominent. And then yeah, above that, you start to get a little bit of the kind of chocolatey and brown sugary character coming out of the beer. So for me, the chocolatey side of this beer is quite interesting because, as I say, this one kind of, you do get a little bit of old school Brewdog sweet stout character out of this one. So I would say that it has in the region of like a 70% cocoa chocolatey note to it, but further up on the nose, further forward on the nose I should say, you do get some really nice Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type notes out of it. So yeah, that's a really interesting point to make out of this one too. But yeah, it's, as I say, 70-80% cocoa chocolate in there, some more milky chocolatey character coming out of the beer as well. Further forward, 50-60% cocoa chocolate, and then as I say, above that you're getting a little bit of a kind of butterscotchy, butter candy type thing, but big above the chocolate you're getting lots of brown sugary note. So for me, there's a good bit of that leathery kind of brown sugar, which usually indicates a slightly longer wort boil. But this beer as well, it smells, even though it's barrel aged, you can smell that this is going to be a big sort of sticky and thick beast. which does make me wonder if they've used a double mash or something like that in here originally. Of course, it could be the effect of the aging, but yeah, you certainly have a good little bit of, I would say, big leathery brown sugars, straight up treacle molasses in there. You do have a little bit of a fudgy Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy thing, and yeah, there's a little tiny bit of like a toasty brown sugar as well, but I'd say it's more treacle molasses. Yeah, more treacle molasses in the middle, leathery brown sugars underneath, and a little bit of a toasty brown sugar too. So yeah, the malty side of this beer is really interesting. Very old school Brewdog, which is something that I quite miss. In terms of the hoppy side of things, then you've got a little bit of earthiness coming out of this one. You do have a little bit of you do have a little touch of floral and grassy component to this beer as well. But remember, with this beer basically being 10 years old, it was barrel aged before that. Pretty much all of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one to an extent, but still, you get little remnants of floral character, little touch of a grassiness in there as well, and then you also have all the fruity character coming out of it. So yeah, that also comes from the hoppy side of things. I'd be very curious to know what hops they actually used in this beer, but on the fruity side of things, I would say this beer, it has got a lovely kind of raisiny sharpness to it, but then lots and lots of big juicy oily plums, some prunes in there, a little bit of datey character as well, but I'm getting quite a little bit of blackberry and blackcurrant coming out of this beer too, and the fruity character is nice and big and oily, and it fits in with everything else with this beer. This one really has a lovely kind of chocolate brownie cakey vibe to it, with these big, pardon me, sort of boozy red fruity characters coming out of it. So yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it is about time that we taste this one. So yeah, this is the Brewdog Paradox Isle of Arran 15% version, an Imperial Stout aged for, it didn't say actually how long, but aged in Isle of Arran whisky casks, which are one of my favourite Scotch malts, I have to say. Really curious to try my first Paradox. Let's do this. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. Oh yeah. I'm going to say straight away, that is really damn good. I'm really curious to see how this one's going to compare to the other two Paradox beers that I have that I'm going to review in this kind of Crazy Beers for 10 Years series. Because this one, I'm going to say straight away that it has a lovely impact sweetness, and then the further you go into the aftertaste with it, it really builds up this big, more kind of roasty, toasty type character, and that does work very, very well with it. It's awesome. It really is very good. So, yeah, this beer is pretty ridiculous, to be honest with you. It's very, very nice. It's got a lovely balance to it. I think once we try some of the other ones, we can comment a little bit more on the aging and things. What I probably should have done was start with the youngest one and kind of work it up that way, and you could have seen how the beer progressed. But this is quite impressive that the beer itself is 10 years old. The barrel's still there, and it still has a bit of that roasty, toasty Russian Imperial Stout quality to it as well, but it has a big, sweet impact, I would say. Yeah, let's break this beer down then and describe it a little bit more in depth for you. But what I will say is that it gives you everything that you would want from a Scotch whisky barrel aged Imperial Stout very easily. So, middle third of your palate then, let's do this. My first taste of the Paradox certainly hasn't let me down. But yeah, middle third of your palate then, you can feel the base of the beer is that lovely, smooth and slightly dry European oaky type quality. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, in the base, there's a little touch of vanilla in there, but very, very minimal. But then above that kind of drier oaky character, you get the layer of spirit. And for me, this one's quite interesting because the Arran whiskey in this case is showing quite a lot of brightness. It strikes me as being one of their more kind of, maybe it's one of their younger. They've only used the barrel for one of their younger whiskies, come to think of it, because it feels very bright. The spirit layer feels very bright and very floral. So yeah, very bright, very kind of floral character out of it, but at the same time you do get a little bit of a sweet character from it too. Nice little bit of fruitiness, I would add as well. A wee bit of a kind of oily pear and apricot-y type note out of it, but quite a bright spirit at the same time. The brown sugary characters are a little bit more oily, but they're quite bright and a little touch toasted too. So yeah, the spirit layer in this beer is really interesting. So yeah, above that you start to get the nice roasty toasty well-fired bread crust from the Russian Imperial Stout side of things. So you've got that roasty toasty well-fired, almost like black malty type character in there. I'm really surprised at how well that's held up, to be quite honest with you. It's cool that that is still having such a prominent effect in the beer. But then yeah, above the roasty toasty well-fired bread crust, you've got a little bit of a more kind of rye bready type layer in there. It's a little bit of a dry rye bread, but it's also got a little touch of kind of caramelisation to it, which I think works really well. And then above that layer, you start getting some of the kind of more chocolate cakey type things. So yeah, really interesting beer from that perspective. But I will say, the kind of chocolate cakey, chocolate brownie layer that it has is lovely. It's very smooth and almost kind of silky in its characteristics. I do really like how that pieces together in this one. So yeah, the beer side of things, roasty toasty well-fired bread crust, a rye bready layer, that lovely sort of silky, that lovely kind of silky chocolate brownie type note to it, and then above that you start to get the actual chocolate out of the beer. So at the back of that middle third of your palate, you've got a really, sort of 80-90% cocoa chocolate, and you can, quite a strong, almost bitter chocolate. But then as you move further forward to the front of that middle third of your palate, you can feel that it mellows out and it gives you maybe a sort of 50 or 60% cocoa chocolate. Remember that trend with your palate, that sweeter flavours come out further forward, more bitter flavours come out further back. But yeah, that's the chocolatey layer on this one covered. Above that, you start to get the kind of brown sugary notes out of the beer. So you can feel there's a little bit of a roasty toasty kind of brown sugar in there. And then you have, pardon me, above that you start to get a more, you get a bit of a leathery brown sugar out of this one, but not too much. I do wonder if this RIS is double mash rather than having a particularly long wort boil. Again, it could be the effects of the aging, the fact that this beer's 10 years old and the actual barrel aging. But yeah, above the roasty toasty well-fired bread crust, you do get a little bit of a leathery layer coming out of this one, and then you can feel a circle in the middle third of your palate that is a bit more of a treacly molasses type thing to this Imperial Stout. The more that I drink of this one, the kind of more it sweetens up, but it certainly does have that more roasty toasty RIS Russian Imperial Stout kind of character to it. A little bit of a robust stout, I have to say. But I like it. I certainly do like how this pieces together. So, yeah, the way this beer goes together in that sense is really nice. The more that I drink of this, the more I enjoy it, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's a great beer, this one. It is old school Russian Imperial Stout on a lovely Scotch whisky barrel, and it finds the balance really nicely. If all the Paradox beers are like this, I can see why this series did get a little bit of hype back in the day. But I think we've covered the middle third of your palate in this one. Let's go on to the back third of your palate then, and look at that. As I've always said, though, the sweeter flavours come out further forward on your palate, the more bitter flavours come out further back. And remember, the back third of your palate is going to show you similar flavours to the middle third of your tongue, just at different intensities. So So yeah, the back third of your palate, you can feel the dry, woody character in the base is just a little bit more intense. You've got the kind of spirity layer in there too, which feels a little bit more kind of roasty and toasty, brown sugary actually in that sense, which is quite interesting. And then you have the kind of roasty, toasty, well-fire bread crusty layer above that, a little bit of the rye bread, but then that layer feels a little bit lighter and more airy, of course, but then you also have, pardon me, the chocolate brownie layer sitting above that, which does feel a little bit lighter. I wouldn't describe it as being airy in a sense, but you can feel that layer is a little bit taller and things, and it's really nice. So yeah, the malty character on the back third of your palate on this beer is really nice as well. But creeping on top of that kind of cakey layer that the beer has on the back third of your palate, you can just feel some of the more leathery aspects of the brown sugar in there. We never really mentioned the border region between middle and back third of your palate, but you certainly get some rye bread in the base, and for me it's quite a rye bready character that's in there. But yeah, the dry leathery brown sugars just creep on top of that kind of cakey aspect of the beer, and then you've got the yeasty notes just sitting above all of that, which is great. So yeah, for me, the yeasty side of this beer I find really interesting. So for me, the yeasty side of things, it's like a kind of really dense, doughy, sort of rye bready character that's in there. And it does get sweeter the more you go into the aftertaste with it. It's got a little bit of woody character to it and a little bit of roasty, toasty bread crust around it. But then you get a wee bit of the honeycomb character. And all of this, of course, sits on top of that back third of the palate. So like I say, dense, doughy, rye bready character in there. Little bit of woodiness, a little bit of graininess and stuff, and then a toasty, bit of a toasty honeycomb type quality sitting around it too. But definitely on the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. And yeah, that is very nice with this one too. So yeah, interesting stuff from the malty and barrel and yeasty side of this beer, which is where the most of the complexity is going to come out. But let's have a wee look at the hoppy side of things then. The green component, most Imperial stouts are not the most hop forward of styles in the first place, and when you barrel age them, you're going to get the hoppy character dropping out. And if you keep this beer in your cellar, as I've done for quite a long time, again you're going to have quite a little bit of the hoppy character drops out. But in the back corners of the palate, you do have quite a little bit of a strong, kind of robust, earthy bitterness. That lingers there as you reach maybe about the half until you reach the kind of halfway point along the sides of your tongue. Then you get a little bit of herbal character, and as you reach the front corners of the palate, there's a little touch of floral note there too. But round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy and things like that. And it's quite an oily, grassy character that you get out of this one, just with that little touch of earthiness. So that little touch of zestiness, sorry, not earthiness. Brain isn't working at this point because I'm a little bit tired. But yeah, the green component in this beer is still present in this one, despite the beer being out of date and over 10 years old. But that's kind of impressive, I have to say. So yeah, don't be scared to age your Paradox beers. I maybe need to buy a couple more of these and keep them for the channel's 20th anniversary 10 years down the line. But yeah, let's have a little look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of this beer. So yeah, for me, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, a little bit of kind of rye bread in the base, then the more kind of cakey notes above that. But the base of that front third of your palate, lovely, smooth, European oaky character in there. Above that, you've got the spirit layer too, the roasty well-fire bread crust, and then above that, you have more of a. You do have a little bit of that cakey sort of thing, and then it's all about that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So, for me, the fruity side of this beer is quite interesting. When you take it in, you've got a lovely kind of big, you do get a little bit of a sharp raisiny note in there, but that very quickly gives way to be a more juicy plum and pruny type character. So yeah, raisiny note on the top of that, pardon me, took some of that down the wrong way, raisiny note on the top part of that back half of the front third of your palate. Underneath that big, quite bright juicy plums, there's a little bit of drier prune in there, a little bit of date underneath. But yeah, this beer really leans more toward the kind of red fruity characters. As you move further forward into the middle of that front half of the front third of your palate, it's more about a kind of juicy figgy type character coming out of the beer. So yeah, as I say, big kind of juicy figgy note in there, and as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's got a lovely kind of like blackcurranty base, but I get a lot of juicy blackberry just sitting on top of that. But yeah, blackcurrant in the base, blackberry on top. The way that that goes together is really very quite nice. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. So for me, the fruity character in this one is really juicy and has a little bit of sharpness to it, which is kind of interesting. Well, sharpness maybe isn't the right word, but it's quite, it has that little bit of punch to it, which I think is great. So yeah, for me, the way that this beer pieces together is pretty awesome in that sense. But it's a lovely Imperial Stout, this one. Proper old school RIS sitting on top of it. Just from the way it goes together, I would say it probably is double mash. I don't think it's had a particularly long wort boil, but it is quite a high IBU RIS, this one. And then you've got the Arran barrels with their kind of complexity, just adding a lot of depth to this beer. But beautiful, beautiful beer, this one, and I think we need to try some of the other Paradox varieties. But this has been a very nice introduction to the series, and we'll see how we get on with the others. But yeah, I think we can round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer, I'd say it's kind of bottom end of full bodied for me. The carbonation is very smooth. It has a good little bit of cleanliness to it. Actually, we always joke in Scotland that we love our tap water. We're very, very proud of our tap water and the quality of the water you have here in Scotland, but it does have a little bit of that Scottish cleanliness to it, for sure. It's got an almost kind of silky mouthfeel, in fact, and I think this beer finds a really good balance. You're probably talking about it having, sort of 70-ish, 80 IBUs, but at the same time, it's got this lovely kind of silky sweetness to it, which just kind of builds up the whole vibe of the beer, which is really interesting. So yeah, the barrel side of this one, Arran whiskey has this lovely smooth character to it, and it's quite complex and diverse in its flavour. But then on top of that, you have this old school RIS, which you don't see these days. But Brewdog's old school RISs always have this kind of sweet nature to them into the aftertaste, and the beer also shows that. So this beer, in a way, is like an old school kind of nostalgia trip for me when it comes to thinking about the old Brewdog beers I had. I really like how everything kind of pieces together in this one. But yeah, as I say, I think this beer is probably about 75-ish, maybe 80 IBUs. You could debate that until the cows come home if you wanted to. But as we said, the malt base has a little bit of the malt base and woody character. It's got dryness underneath, lovely smoothness in the middle, a little bit of a thicker sweetness too, then a dry sweetness on top. There's a little bit of hoppy bitterness to this beer, but the fruits are particularly nice and juicy. Lots of kind of berries and things like that. So yeah, big plummy characters, big sort of black currants and figs and things. I think this has turned out to be a very, very nice first experience of the Paradox beer. But yeah, bottom end of full bodied for me overall. You can kind of feel that this one has been barrel aged, and then I've kept it for a good few years too. But absolutely happy with this one, and I think we can round off this review at this point with this one. So yeah, this was the Paradox Isle of Arran 15% version, one of my oldest Brewdog bottles that we've opened up and now had a little look at, but it certainly didn't disappoint, even though it was a couple of months out of date. So yeah, I think this is awesome. So have a little look at this beer if you do get the chance. Try some of the Isle of Arran Distillery's whiskey, because it is very, very good, very well-rounded whiskey distiller for me, Isle of Arran. So yeah, I can't recommend them enough. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brewdog as well. Let me know what your favourite members of the Paradox series are too. This has been a really nice introduction to that particular series, and we do have Compass Box and Heaven Hill to have a little look at on the channel over the next few videos. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, trying the old school, probably 2014 bought version of Isle of Arran Paradox, I think was really quite interesting. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below, and I will catch you guys in the next review. Rambling at this point because I'm just that little bit tired. But until the next time, slange it, skull, cheers. Check out some of the Brewdog's Paradox series. You will enjoy these if you get the chance to try them. And I'll see you guys in the next review. Slange it, skull, cheers. A lovely Isle of Arran whisky barrel aged Imperial Stout from Brewdog in Ellon in Aberdeenshire in Scotland. Ciao just now.